Picture this. It's the year 161 AD, and in a villa just outside Rome, a child is born who will one day become the most infamous emperor in Roman history. His name was Lucius Aurelius Commodus, born on August 31st, to the respected philosopher-emperor Marcus Aurelius and his wife Faustina the Younger. He was the 10th of 14 children and the only son to survive. His twin brother Titus died at the age of 4. He would be the first emperor born while his father was the emperor, setting him apart from the moment he drew his first breath. From the outside, young Commodus had everything. He was born into the heart of the mighty Roman Empire at its peak, the son of one of history's greatest rulers. Marcus Aurelius was considered one of the wisest emperors, known as the philosopher king, renowned for his stoic principles and intellectual prowess. The boy had access to the finest education money could buy, trained by the best tutors in the empire. But even as a child, there were disturbing signs of what was to come. Even as a young child, Commodus displayed a penchant for cruelty that would carry into his rule later on. One story goes that the young prince once cast a servant into a furnace for drawing a bath that was too cold. While this tale might be embellished by hostile historians, it speaks to a pattern of behavior that would define his entire life, an explosive temper combined with an almost casual disregard for human life. When tragedy struck the imperial household in 1665, when his elder brother Titus died, leaving Commodus as Marcus' only son and heir, the pressure on the young prince intensified. Like his father before him, Commodus enjoyed the benefits of an exemplary Roman aristocratic education, focusing on raising a child fit to rule the empire. But unlike his father, who embraced philosophy and wisdom, Commodus seemed drawn to entirely different interests. In 177, Lucius was made co-ruler and heir to his father, the Emperor Marcus Aurelius. He joined Marcus in his campaign against invading German tribes along the Danube, but even here, the differences between father and son became apparent. While Marcus Aurelius saw warfare as a necessary duty, something to be endured for the good of Rome, Commodus viewed it as an unwelcome interruption to his pleasures. Marcus Aurelius died in March 180 AD in the city of Vindobona, modern Vienna, as he was overseeing the Romans' ongoing campaigns on the Danubian frontier. Although the historian Cassius Dio records that Marcus remained disappointed in his attempts to educate his son, his attempts to ensure the smooth succession were at least successful. At just 18 years old, Commodus found himself the sole ruler of the greatest empire the world had ever known. When the widely loved Marcus died in 180, Commodus became the lone emperor at age 18. The transition of power was remarkably smooth, a testament to Marcus Aurelius's careful planning. But what happened next would shock the Roman world. After the death of Marcus in March 180, he quickly came to terms with the Germans. Soon after he became sole ruler, Lucius changed his name to Marcus Aurelius Commodus Antoninus. One of the earliest and most notable decisions of Commodus was to end the Marcomannic Wars, a series of conflicts that his father had vigorously pursued against Germanic tribes along the Danube frontier. In 180 AD, shortly after coming to power, Commodus chose to negotiate peace, withdrawing Roman forces and making concessions to the tribes. To the Roman elite, this was nothing short of scandalous. Here was an emperor abandoning his father's military campaigns, making peace with barbarians who had been terrorizing Roman territories for years. His son, for all his other faults, had no desire for conflict. His reasons for seeking peace appear to have been less than noble, however. The historians are unanimous that the emperor quickly lost interest in continuing his father's campaign, encouraged by the group of favorites and sycophants that gathered around the new emperor and encouraged him to return to the comforts of Rome. But Commodus's early decisions were just the beginning. What truly set him apart from every emperor before him was his complete abandonment of traditional imperial duties. Reigning from 180 to 192 AD, Commodus all but ignored his official duties. Instead, he devoted himself to his harem of 300 females and a like number of males, played gladiator at Rome's Colosseum, and ordered the executions of countless foes, allies, and family members alike. Commodus's administrative approach showed a disinterest in the day-to-day governance of the empire, leading to the delegation of significant responsibilities to a cadre of favored officials. These individuals, often chosen for their loyalty rather than their expertise, wielded considerable influence over imperial policies and decisions, contributing to a governance style marked by caprice and extravagance. The emperor, who should have been leading armies, reviewing legislation, and maintaining the delicate balance of Roman politics, was instead spending his time in increasingly bizarre pursuits. After his sister's plot, the emperor refused to appear in public, and all communication went through the new chamberlain. Perennis took his new role seriously and proved to be both brutal and efficient, eliminating any rivals to his authority while making numerous enemies along the way. As he amassed great wealth and Commodus pulled further away from governmental responsibilities, he began to believe himself to be the true emperor, not Commodus. This pattern would repeat throughout Commodus's reign. He would delegate power to various favorites and freedmen, who would enrich themselves while Rome's governance suffered. Sources such as Cassius Dio indicate that Commodus avoided the running of the empire on a day-to-day basis, and instead delegated this to a string of favorites whom he made his chief ministers. These men, whether freedmen like Sauterus, and later the powerful Cleander, or Praetorian prefects like Perennis, would rise to power, manage affairs to their own benefit, and then be cut down and replaced either through intrigue. But it was Commodus's personal obsessions that truly scandalized Rome. The first of these inept emperors was Commodus, the son of Marcus Aurelius, who, according to most historians, was not only debauched and corrupt, but also a megalomaniac, seeing himself as the reincarnation of the Greek god Hercules. This wasn't just a casual comparison. Commodus took his identification with Hercules to extraordinary lengths. He was very vain and strongly believed himself to be the reincarnation of Hercules, so much so that he ordered statues of himself be dressed like Hercules, and he ordered that people call him Hercules, son of Zeus. Innumerable statues around the empire were set up portraying him in the guise of Hercules, reinforcing the image of him as a demigod, a physical giant, a protector, and a warrior who fought against men and beasts. Moreover, as Hercules, he could claim to be the son of Jupiter, the supreme god of the Roman pantheon. This delusion of divinity wasn't just embarrassing, it was dangerous. These tendencies now increased to megalomaniacal proportions. Far from celebrating his descent from Marcus Aurelius, the actual source of his power, he stressed his own personal uniqueness as the bringer of a new order. Commodus began to see himself not as the inheritor of Rome's traditions, but as their destroyer and rebuilder. The most shocking manifestation of this megalomania came in his unprecedented decision to fight as a gladiator. Never before in Rome's long history had an emperor descended into the arena to fight for public entertainment. For the first time in Rome's 900-year history, an emperor would fight in the arena. The Romans found Commodus's gladiatorial combat to be scandalous and disgraceful. According to Herodian, spectators of Commodus thought it unbecoming of an emperor to take up arms in the amphitheatre for sport when he could be campaigning against barbarians among other opponents of Rome. The consensus was that it was below his office to participate as a gladiator, but Commodus didn't seem to care what anyone thought. The activities which held Commodus' attention and with which he spent his time were primarily surrounding gladiatorial combat. He would take to the arena and engage in combat, which the Romans viewed as being scandalous and disgraceful. Styling himself after the Greek hero Hercules, he fought as a gladiator in the Colosseum, though it was never a fair fight. It was forbidden for the emperor to come to any real harm in the Colosseum, so he invariably won every bout. The scale of his gladiatorial activities was staggering. In all, Commodus participated in 735 contests as a gladiator, according to the Historia Augusta. Commodus not only oversaw the games, but appeared there to fight over 700 times. Of course, he was protected, typically fighting from a distance or on an elevated platform. These weren't real contests. They were elaborate theatrical performances designed to feed the emperor's ego. He was not an inspired combatant. He killed animals by bow, standing above the arena. When he fought fellow gladiators, they would purposely submit. Unlike Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal in Gladiator, Commodus was far more violent though. Knowing he was the emperor, many opponents immediately surrendered to him. But even these staged victories weren't enough for Commodus. Cassius Dio and the writers of the Augustan history say that Commodus was a skilled archer who could shoot the heads off ostriches in full gallop and kill a panther as it attacked a victim in the arena. Commodus would also slay exotic animals such as lions, ostriches, hippos, elephants, and giraffes. At one time, Commodus is said to have slaughtered 3 elephants in the arena completely on his own. The emperor's bloodlust extended beyond the arena. Cassius Dio claimed that citizens of Rome who lacked feet, either through accident or illness, were taken to the arena, where they were tethered together for Commodus to club to death while pretending they were giants. Dio also wrote that it was Commodus's custom to privately use deadly weapons to fight, murdering and maiming his opponents. However, in private practice fights, Commodus would slay his opponents. The Romans were outraged when Commodus would order wounded soldiers and amputees into the arena to be slayed. Non-military citizens who had lost their feet due to injury or illness would be tied together for Commodus to club to death. These weren't the actions of a rational ruler. They were the acts of a man who had completely lost touch with reality, who saw other human beings as nothing more than props in his twisted fantasies. Fighting gladiators, Roman citizens, and wild creatures, one historian claims that Commodus was always seen stained with blood. As Commodus descended deeper into madness and violence, the very foundations of Roman government began to crumble around him. The emperor, who should have been the guardian of Roman law and tradition, had become its greatest threat. In the view of Cassius Dio, his accession marked the descent from a kingdom of gold to one of iron and rust. With the death of Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius in March of 180 CE, the long reign of the 5 good emperors came to an end, and with it so did the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. The Golden Age was over. The dark reign of Commodus had begun, and with it, the slow but inexorable decline of the greatest empire the world had ever known. But this was just the beginning of the story. The worst was yet to come. As the emperor's paranoia deepened, his grip on reality began to slip entirely. The plot failed, and Commodus had Lucilla executed, but his paranoia only grew. His behavior became increasingly erratic, and he began to see himself as a divine figure. No longer content with merely being emperor, Commodus began to reshape the very identity of Rome itself in his twisted image. The transformation was staggering in its audacity. Perhaps seeing this as an opportunity, early in 192 Commodus, declaring himself the new Romulus, ritually refounded Rome, renaming the city Colonia, Lucia, Annia Commodiana. But the madness didn't stop there. All the months of the year were renamed to correspond exactly with his now 12 names: Lucius, Aelius, Aurelius, Commodus, Augustus, Hercules, Romanus, Exuperatorius, Amazonius, Invictus, Felix, and Pius. Not stopping there, he rebranded the Roman legions as Commodianae, named the grain-importing fleet from Africa as Alexandria Commodiana Togata, and even the esteemed Senate became the Commodian Fortunate Senate. Every aspect of Roman life was now branded with his name. The citizens themselves were no longer Romans, but Commodiani. His palace, the people, and even the day these changes were decreed, were all stamped with the moniker Commodianus. It was as if Commodus sought to erase over 1,000 years of Roman history and replace it entirely with himself. This megalomaniacal rebranding wasn't confined to Rome alone. An inscribed altar from Dura Europos on the Euphrates shows that Commodus' titles and the renaming of the months were disseminated to the farthest reaches of the empire. Moreover, that even auxiliary military units received the title Commodiana, and that he claimed 2 additional titles: Pacator Orbis, pacifier of the world, and Dominus Noster, our Lord. From Britain to the edges of Mesopotamia, the Roman Empire was being systematically transformed into a monument to one man's delusions of grandeur. Meanwhile, the emperor's gladiatorial obsession reached new heights of depravity. In November 192, Commodus held plebeian games, in which he shot hundreds of animals with arrows and javelins every morning, and fought as a gladiator every afternoon, winning all the fights. These weren't fair contests, of course. In complete disregard for his position as emperor, Commodus regularly rode in chariot races and fought many times against maimed gladiators or drugged beasts, usually in private but often in public as well. The spectacles grew more grotesque by the day. According to Cassius Dio, Commodus once killed 100 lions in a single day. In one particularly chilling display, he decapitated a running ostrich with a specially designed dart, and afterward carried his sword and the bleeding head of the dead bird over to the senators' seating area, and motioned to suggest that they were to be next. The senators, trapped in their seats, could only watch in horror as their emperor paraded the severed head before them like a trophy. Dio notes that the targeted senators actually found this more ridiculous than frightening, and chewed on laurel leaves to conceal their laughter. But perhaps most disturbing were Commodus's staged fights against the defenseless. In one particularly twisted gladiatorial bout, Commodus wanted to reenact the story of Hercules defeating the giants, so he gathered groups of disabled people and forced them to fight him in the arena. These weren't contests. They were public executions disguised as entertainment, with the emperor playing the role of divine executioner. The emperor's cruelty extended far beyond the arena. Commodus exhibited various notable acts of paranoia during his rule. He often suspected conspiracies against him, leading to a wave of executions and persecutions. He even went to extreme lengths, such as executing prominent individuals, including his own sister, Lucilla, whom he deemed as threats to his power. The imperial court became a place of constant terror, where a single wrong word or even an innocent glance could result in death. Commodus's paranoia manifested in increasingly bizarre ways. Commodus, known for his volatility and cruelty, frequently executed Roman citizens for perceived slights. Notably, he attempted to annihilate the prominent Quinctilia family. Despite no proven involvement in any conspiracies, the brothers Condianus and Maximus were executed, largely due to their significant wealth and potential dissatisfaction with Commodus's rule. Wealth itself had become a crime, as the emperor saw prosperity as a potential threat to his power. Even the most trivial infractions could prove fatal. In another incident at Terme Taurin's Roman baths, an attendant faced a brutal end, being thrown into an oven for providing lukewarm bathwater. The emperor's rage knew no bounds, and his subjects lived in constant fear of accidentally triggering his wrath. As 192 drew to a close, Commodus announced his most shocking plan yet. In December, he announced his intention to inaugurate the year 1933 as both consul and gladiator on the 1st of January. To celebrate the Roman New Year in AD 192, Commodus decided he wanted to make an appearance before the Roman people, not from the palace in traditional purple robes, but from the gladiators' barracks, escorted by the rest of the gladiators. After telling his plan to Marcia the night before, she begged him not to behave so carelessly and bring disgrace to the Roman Empire. This was the final straw. The idea of a Roman emperor inaugurating his consulship from a gladiator's barracks was so shocking, so fundamentally offensive to Roman tradition and dignity, that even his closest advisors were horrified. Commodus, upset by Marcia's reaction, then told his plan to Aemilius Latus, the Praetorian prefect, and Eclectus, his servant. After they too tried to dissuade him, he became furious and put their 3 names on a prescribed list of people to be executed the next morning, along with prominent senators. The emperor's rage at being questioned sealed his fate. On the afternoon of December 31st, 192 AD, as Commodus prepared for his bath, his favorite servant boy, Commodus, found the tablet on which the list was written and ran into Marcia while holding the tablet. Marcia took it from him, thinking she was protecting a document from potentially being ruined, and in horror saw her name at the top of the list. The woman who had shared his bed, who had been his closest companion through years of madness and bloodshed, was marked for death simply for questioning his judgment. According to Herodian, she cried out, "Well done indeed, Commodus. This is fine return for the kindness and affection I have lavished on you and for the drunken insults which I have endured from you all these years. A fuddled drunkard is not going to get the better of a sober woman." The conspirators moved swiftly. She met with Latus and Eclectus, and the 3 of them decided they had to kill Commodus to save their own lives. Usually, Marcia gave the emperor his first drink after his bath, so he could have the pleasure of drinking from his lover's hand. It was easy, then, for her to mix poison with the wine, but even in death, Commodus would prove difficult to kill. After drinking the wine, he became so ill that his vomiting would not cease. The 3 conspirators were afraid he would vomit up all the poison, so they ordered Narcissus, a young athlete, to strangle Commodus for a large reward. As the sun set on the last day of 192 AD, the man who had terrorized an empire for 12 years met his end not in glorious battle or noble sacrifice, but naked and helpless in his bath, strangled by his own wrestling partner. On 31st December, Marcia poisoned Commodus's food, but he vomited up the poison, so the conspirators sent his wrestling partner Narcissus to strangle him in his bath. The death of Commodus sent shockwaves throughout the Roman world. Upon his death, the Senate declared him a public enemy, a de facto damnatio memoriae, and restored the original name of the city of Rome and its institutions. Statues of Commodus were demolished. The great renaming was undone, the months returned to their traditional names, and Rome became Rome once again. But the damage was done. Commodus' death marked the end of the Nerva-Antonine dynasty. Commodus was succeeded by Pertinax, whose reign was short. He became the first claimant to be usurped during the year of the 5 emperors. The golden age of Roman peace and prosperity, the Pax Romana that had lasted for nearly 2 centuries, died with Commodus in that bath. In the famous words of noted historian Dio Cassius, Commodus's lack of interest in political affairs was the starting point for the decline of the Roman Empire, leaving Commodus responsible for initiating Rome's decline from a kingdom of gold to one of iron and rust. The philosopher-emperor Marcus Aurelius had left behind an empire at the height of its power and culture. His son left behind chaos, civil war, and the beginning of the end. The conspirators had succeeded in ending Commodus's reign of terror, but they had no plan for what came next. Commodus' death marked the end of the Nerva Antonine dynasty and the beginning of a period of chaos known as the Year of the Five Emperors. His successor, Pertinax, ruled for only 87 days before being assassinated by the Praetorian Guard. The empire remained in turmoil until Septimius Severus seized control in 193 CE. The irony was complete. Commodus, who had spent his reign trying to become a god, who had renamed an empire after himself and fought as a gladiator to win the love of the masses, died forgotten and reviled. His statues were smashed, his name was chiseled from monuments, and his memory was officially condemned. The man who had tried to make himself immortal through marble and bronze found himself erased from history as if he had never existed at all. Yet in that erasure lay perhaps the most fitting epitaph for the reign of Commodus. Rome had survived tyrants before, and it would survive them again. But it would never again know the peace and prosperity of the age that died with Marcus Aurelius. The Golden Age was over, and the Iron Age of decline had begun. Commodus had achieved a kind of immortality after all, not as a god, but as the emperor who broke the back of the greatest empire the world had ever known.